What's up, guys? I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be talking about market cycles. All right, so let's get started. So with market cycles, I don't want to go through the conventional, the recession, the trough, the peak, all that other stuff. You see that happen all the time. But the thing is, with the real estate cycle, the recession is going to happen. Whether it happens or not, you can't control it. You can't do anything about it. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through the regular market cycle for real estate, specifically disregarding the indirect and direct causes of recession. So what that means is we're going to be going through the buyer's market and the seller's market and how they occur, what caused them to occur, and how to sort of keep an eye out or keep a track on what's happening in the market. All right. So the first things first, we're going to be starting off with the buyer market one. With buyer market one, you're pretty much looking at an oversupply of product in the market. Typically, you're looking at condos or apartments or houses, semi-detached properties, usually the smaller ones that are a little bit more affordable. You're looking at a huge oversupply of them with occupancy at its lowest. The main reason behind this is that people can't afford the price points for these assets, right? So they're sitting on the market much longer. They're trying to be bought up, but they're not being bought up. Even the developers are giving out discounts for these assets. And we're pretty much seeing that the days on market for these properties are sitting, anywhere from 30 days to 40 days to 50 days. We obviously haven't seen it in Canada and in Ontario for a very long time, but this does happen. So take a look at these properties and these markets that are going through this. When you look at micro markets like smaller towns, smaller cities, you'll see this happen because they aren't really used to having the resources of a fully built city, helping them and supporting them in a way where if there isn't demand from a certain demographic, another demographic will come by and pick up the slack. They don't have that. So when you look at these smaller cities, you'll actually notice that this happens there much more frequently than it would happen in a larger city like the GTA. The next thing you'll notice is that the job growth is actually flatlining. There's no new jobs, no new investment, no new companies coming in. And in certain cases, the job growth actually declines because we're not seeing enough people come into the city, and there aren't enough tax breaks, enough tax cuts or incentives for businesses to come in. So why would somebody want to invest any sort of heavy cash into a city which isn't really giving them any benefits? So when you have less demand for people to come in due to employment, you have less people asking for spaces to live. And so this ultimately leads to people, A, not being able to afford anything, B, they have a lack of new jobs, and C, because of the oversupply that's sitting there, you can't just sit on an indefinite amount of mortgage where if you don't have enough money to pay for it, how is it really going to support itself? So what that equates to is that now you have an increase in foreclosure rates that end up happening in the market. Now, you're probably wondering, how do we get out from this into the buyer market phase 2, where there's actually demand and there's actually supply and there's actual properties that are being built and sold? Well, what happens is that if the area doesn't end up having any sort of job growth, any sort of tax breaks, any sort of government support, it'll end up going into a slump or a decline or a very, very slow, very gradual reduction in sort of values, right? You'll have a deflation take place. You'll have asset prices go absolutely nowhere, maybe growing $1,000 a year, if that. But more or less, you probably won't see any sort of growth in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, jumping from the buyer market 1 to buyer market 2, you need a lot of job growth. That means a lot of government support for businesses to come into the area and produce jobs. So the way you see this starting to take place is through local government. So the government's going to end up having to do 2 things. First of all, they're going to be having lower rates on their debt. Right. So if the lower rate on debt is easier for people to afford housing, people to afford credit cards, for them to purchase renovations on their property, for them to get new cars, ends up easily allowing people to create sort of like a little cycle where if they spend more, more jobs are created and then more money is pumped back into the system, right? I know it doesn't really happen that quickly. You don't expect this to happen in the matter of months. It'll usually take a year to 2 years to actually see this progression take place and unfold. So when you actually end up getting into buyer's market 2, what you'll notice is that there's a lot more job growth happening. A lot of people are going to be immigrating back into the city, and you're going to see a lot of new companies come in. You're going to see local government promoting a lot more in terms of, good things grow in Ontario, stuff like that, right? You're going to see different promotions take place, travel to Newfoundland or travel to New Brunswick. You're going to see a lot of different promotions take place for tourism to come in to try to pump that sort of cash in, to try to create construction jobs like roads or like community housing to end up pumping some economy back into the market as well. You're going to see lower construction costs, loans. You're going to see lower housing loans, lower credit card loans, lower auto loans. You're going to see more and more fluidity of cash and money in the system. And that allows for people to feel a little bit more confident in the fact that their real estate prices are going to go up. Because when cost for lumber, cost for cell phones, cost for shoes ends up going up, so does the cost of real estate, right? Because people have more prosperity, now they're going to be spending more on their housing. You're going to see less number of people in the same house. Instead, what's going to happen is, instead of seeing houses of 4, 5, 6 people in them, you're going to see houses of 2, 3, 4 people in them, because people are now easily affording new properties to purchase. So the time on the market for these properties are going to fall, the days on market. Local and foreign investors are going to be getting in on this. But the thing is, with the local market, the supply that's out there, what they're seeing is that they're seeing a small little blip, right? All they're seeing is a little increase in price points in few neighborhoods, like neighborhood 1, 2, 3. What they're seeing is, oh, well, John down the street, Kelly up the road, and Bob from Bob's Burgers, all three of them had an increase in price point from $200,000 to $250,000. That's awesome. That's great. Now I'm wondering if I should sell my property. It's probably just a few people that are interested, so I'm not really that interested in selling. But what's really happening is that if you keep in mind, with all the government programs that are being out there for affordable housing, for cheaper debt, plus you're seeing all the new job growth taking place, what you're seeing there right now is the beginning of the buyer phase, right? So what that means is that a lot of demand is just starting. It's not pent up yet. So where they're just starting to come into play, all you see is vacancies dropping, right? Occupancies going up, vacancies going down. Currently, this is just like the precursor to rents being increased. So when this takes place over the next few months, you'll see there are no more vacancies, right? Now you're entering into the seller market 1, right? So when you enter into this phase, now you're seeing there's 0 vacancies. They're all gone. The demand is there. Those foreclosures that you saw a few months back, a year ago, gone. All that competition for properties has increased the price point so high that sitting on the market for maybe a week, where it would have taken 2 months, is now a possibility. Less than that is taking place, those transactions, right? You're seeing a lot of construction take place. When you see the hourly wage on construction increase on average for general labor, now you're seeing the prosperity cycle take place right in front of you, right? Because now you're seeing that the supply of contractors isn't as big as you thought it was before. Now, having a contractor where before you could have gotten a contractor in 1 week, do my flooring in a week and you're out. Now it's going to take you 2 weeks to first schedule a meeting, another 3 weeks for them to come in, another 3 weeks after that for them to do the job because they're bouncing between multiple jobs, and then they're going to finish, right? So what would have taken 2 weeks now it takes a month and a half to 2 months to complete. Now, this is something you really want to pay attention to. When people get the feeling that good times are here to stay, we're going to be making money hand over fist, hand over fist, hand over fist. If you look at the number of properties that are selling, at what price point they're selling compared to what they were selling last year, how many days on market they're sitting on compared to what they were last year, you're going to see that if there's a huge spike in what's happening right now, there's a good chance you want to get out of the market, dissolve whatever you have, unless it's a very, very cash flowing property. You want to get out of the market and just sit on the cash for a little bit. Now, granted, the Canadian market right now is operating a little bit differently. This is why I wanted to disclose in the beginning that, getting into this sort of market cycle analysis without recession implications is what we want to focus on. Because if we focus on the external and internal events that are taking place that are producing this, aka COVID, then it pretty much throws everything off, right? But we haven't seen an increase in labor yet. We haven't seen an increase in occupancy for rental markets yet. We haven't seen an increase in rental rates yet. So all of everything whatever I'm discussing right now is independent of what COVID is causing, right? So the rates and all that stuff will go up. We haven't even entered the seller's market yet, right? Just so you're aware, so don't get worried. Closer to the end of this phase, what you're going to notice is that people are going to be purchasing assets that they can't afford. The bank won't lend them on an asset which they don't have enough income to cover, right? Now, that isn't to say the banks are lending on assets that are overpriced. Obviously, there's a difference there. If you can't afford it, you lose your deposit, unless you have some sort of clause in there to protect you. But what I'm referring to is that if your income factor, if the mortgage factor is you can afford 5 times your yearly income, let's say you produce $100,000, you can only afford $500,000 mortgage, right? You can't be putting in offers on $600,000-$700,000 and expect to wholesale the property or expect to flip the property for a profit, because just like you, somebody else is thinking the same thing. And if you can't afford it at your current price point, if the next person above you can't afford it at their price point, it's like a domino effect. Now, when that happens, you end up looking into supply it's just sitting there ready to fall and collapse, right? Because a lot of people end up going like, well, if I'm over leveraging myself, this is one of the main causes of recessions actually. If I'm over leveraging myself in my position, that leaves me open to a much larger level of exposure, just in case the interest rate goes up, or just in case I stay vacant for a month, or just in case I can't flip it in an X amount of time. Now I have to foreclose and then default on the property, right? If a lot of people do this at once, that ends up causing a little bit of a recession, right? But when that happens in this sort of scenario, you're pretty much looking at something called the seller market 2, right? In seller market 1, that's when you want to liquidate. Seller market 2, don't even think about buying, because you've got two main things that are causing the seller market 2 to occur. First thing is low job growth, right? If you have no job growth, you have no occupancy, you have no demand for real estate, you have a reduction in prices. Second thing is going to be oversupply of product. When you have an oversupply of product, who wants to pay $800,000 for a house, which, there's about 1,800 of them out in the market? Why would I still want to pay $800,000 for a house when 1,700 of these guys are desperate to sell and recover at least some of their cash, right? So a lot of those sellers are going to be defaulting or in foreclosure, or they're going to be selling at a heavy discount just to recover most or some of their position. Properties will begin to start sitting on the market for 30, 40, 50, 60 days, a year to try to sell a property, and it still won't be sold, simply because there isn't enough demand for people coming into the city to end up wanting to buy it, right? And if you look at investors, who wants to buy a property where it takes 80 days to sell it? Where do you think you're going to be spending another $150,000 on top of it to sell to somebody else, right? If you don't even want to buy it for $300,000. So there you have it. These are the 4 market phases that I wanted to go over. If you guys have any questions, feel free to give me a shout. Like, comment, subscribe. Just email me, text me, anything you want. Get in touch, and be happy to answer any questions or make a video that you guys want to watch next time. Thank you. Take care.